What if I told you human trafficking happens in Canada? What if I told you human trafficking happens in Alberta? What if I told you human trafficking happens right here in Edmonton? And what if I told you human trafficking looks different than you think it does? What if I told you this could be happening to the boy or girl next door, the woman next door, or the man next door? Let me share with you Brittany's story as she shared it with TEDxUAlberta. When Brittany was young, she hated living at home. It seemed like her mom would bring home a different guy every week, and some of them were awful to her. To make up for this, her mom would take her and her sister out for ice cream. This taught Brittany at a very young age that her affection was something that could be bought. When Brittany was about 14, she met Tyler. He seemed nice and interesting, and he quickly became her boyfriend. Being with Tyler made her feel less lonely. It gave her something to look forward to each day. His friends became her friends, and soon she moved out of her home to live with Tyler. Tyler explained to Brittany that she needed to do something to start bringing in money and help pay for the expenses. This is when things changed. Tyler put up ads for her on Backpage.com and forced Brittany to have sex with guys who responded to the ads in hotel rooms across the city. She did this so that he wouldn't get angry and hit her. Brittany wanted to stop. Tyler told her she wouldn't have to see so many clients if she could find him another girl to make up for it. Brittany brought him Angie, a friend from Facebook. Brittany told Angie she could make a lot of money working for Tyler, and Angie believed her. A few weeks later, Tyler was arrested. Angie had gone to the police after Tyler raped her. Brittany was taken to a shelter for victims of domestic violence, and they connected her with TEDxUAlberta. Never before had she considered that she had been trafficked. So what is human trafficking? Let's take it to the simplest definition possible. When humans become a commodity. When one human has no choice, no voice, no rights, and is sold or traded as a commodity by another. Human trafficking involves three elements. One is action, so what is done? Recruitment, transportation, receipt. Two, means, so how is this done? Coercion, manipulation, abuse of power. And three, purpose. Why is this done? Sexual exploitation, forced labor. Now let's take this definition and put it into real life terms with Brittany's story. Tyler recruited Brittany, action, using manipulation, coercion, and threats, means, to sexually exploit her, purpose. Brittany had no rights. The power resided solely with Tyler. He decided her rates. He decided her schedule. He decided her appointments. Brittany had no choice. The most common forms of human trafficking include sex trafficking, forced labor, domestic servitude, and organ removal. The most common form, both globally and nationally, is sex trafficking, with the average age of entry into sex trafficking being 13 years old. Humans are the second highest trafficked commodity in the world, second only to drugs and weapons. According to the United Nations, an estimated 30 million people are being trafficked worldwide for the purposes of sexual exploitation and forced labor. I want to narrow in on Canada. Does human trafficking actually happen in a nation as developed as ours? The answer is yes. And while I will share some stats with you, I want you to keep in mind that this represents only a fraction of what is actually happening in our country. In 2016, there were 340 reported incidents where human trafficking was the most serious offense. Of those, the highest reported incidents came in order from Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta. So not only is this happening in Canada, it's happening here in Alberta in a notable way. Did you know that we have an entire nonprofit in our province dedicated to working on human trafficking? TEDxUAlberta, the Action Coalition on Human Trafficking for Alberta, works alongside other provincial agencies to provide resources and support to victims of human trafficking. So who are the victims? Globally and nationally, the majority of victims are women, in and around the 75 to 80% range. Of the people that TEDxUAlberta has worked with, roughly 57.9% are internal or Canadian citizens, and around 46% are temporary foreign workers or international victims. I want to go back to that 57.9%. These are internal citizens, residents of Canada being trafficked within our own country. And I would be remiss if I didn't break this down further to acknowledge the disproportionate number of Indigenous women and girls that make up over 22% of the 57.9% of internal victims. The reasons for this are deeply rooted, complex, and systemic. You're probably thinking, okay, so give me some really solid numbers, something that I can get my head wrapped around this situation. This is where things get difficult. Studies have shown that in cases where a human trafficking conviction may be difficult, prosecutors will often pursue another complementary or less serious charge where they feel more confident in a conviction. Another thing that makes accurate statistics so challenging is the hidden nature of this crime. The reluctance of victims and witnesses to come forward, or sadly, people don't even know that human trafficking is what is happening to them. Human trafficking is big business. Think about it this way for a minute. Humans are a reusable resource, unlike drugs. So a trafficker can buy a human once and then can continue over and over to make money off of them, the services that they sell, or even sell them to another trafficker. The average annual income off of one sex trafficking victim is $280,000. An international woman being sex trafficked in Canada is expected to perform, on average, 25 services per day. I share these numbers with you to give you some context, but let me be clear. With stories surrounding human trafficking, sensationalism is an easy route to go. But what this does is re-victimizes the survivor. We need to share their stories in an ethical way. We need to engage our communities and one another to take action without resorting to sensationalizing and taking further advantage of those who have already had everything taken from them. Human trafficking has no stereotype. No one is exempt. The perpetrators don't care who you are. They don't care about your economic status, your family of origin, your hopes, or your dreams. They take advantage of vulnerable people. They identify a weakness and they prey on it. This can happen to anyone. This can happen to a girl from overseas whose family is being promised that she is being taken to Canada for a better life. This can happen to a man who's promised a high-paying job only to arrive here in Canada and find out that that job no longer exists. He has his documents taken away. He doesn't see a dime of the money that he's earned. This can happen to a middle-class teenage girl from your very city who is lured by a boy who shows her attention and showers her with gifts. This can happen to an Indigenous girl who has experienced a life so hard that she knows no different and thinks that this life is all that she is good for. This can happen to anyone. And let's not forget that in order for human trafficking to happen, there has to be demand, which means that there are consumers. So who's buying? When it comes to sex, you might picture someone a little sketchy, someone who lives a rough lifestyle and is frequently in trouble with the law. The truth is, this can be professionals, blue-collar workers, dads, legitimate businesses, and families. We need to remember that trafficking victims have been found in legitimate Alberta businesses in construction, agriculture, retail, hotels, restaurants, nail salons, and in private homes as nannies and caregivers. I want to close with Marco's story. Despite working hard in his hometown in the Philippines, Marco struggled to make ends meet and debt mounted for him and his family. When his cousin gave him the name of a recruiter who offered him a high-paying job as a chef in Sherwood Park, Marco thought this was his opportunity to build a better life for his family. For $10,000, the recruiter would take care of everything. And when Marco said he couldn't afford the fee, the recruiter told him he could repay it once he started working. Marco arrived in Sherwood Park only to find out that the restaurant could no longer give him a job. The only way he could stay in Canada was to be employed as a janitor by a cleaning company. This resulted in 14-hour days of exhausting manual labor and regular insults and physical abuse by the company owner. When Marco approached the owner about his earnings, he was told that they would be withheld until his recruiting fees were paid. He was also told at this time that he was working illegally in Canada because the visa on which he was brought over was only valid for that original job he was contracted for. He was threatened with immediate deportation if he complained. Weeks turned into months, and as Marco had no money, he regularly went hungry and the long days exhausted him. One day, Marco passed out from hunger and fatigue and was taken to an emergency room in Edmonton. The nurse recognized the signs of human trafficking and asked Marco if he needed help. In desperation, Marco shared his story and he was connected with ACT Alberta. ACT Alberta provided him with the resources and support that he needed during his transition period. Marco now has his permanent residency status and his wife and 2 sons have moved over to Canada to live with him. So why me? Why this talk? I acknowledge that I come from a place of privilege, and this privilege gives me an elevated voice and platform from which to start. I want to use that voice to speak for those who can't, for those who are vulnerable, for those who are marginalized, for those who have experienced such trauma that they don't know a life of anything different. I want to be a voice for them, and you can too. We all have the power of a network. So share what you've learned here on social media. The next time you're with friends, make this a topic of conversation. Continue to talk and share and educate yourself. Connect with the organizations and agencies in your area that are doing the work and find out how you can help. Let's raise our children in a way that they respect themselves, one another, and that they know that all human life is of equal value. Let's recognize the warning signs, and if something doesn't look or feel right, let's make a phone call. Let's understand the impact that the cycle of abuse has in relation to human trafficking and raise our children in a way that we put an end to this. Let's use our collective voices in the fight to end human trafficking. Thank you.